So greetings, everyone, and welcome to the Alliance for African Partnership public dialogue on promoting indigenous and traditional crops for sustainable food systems. This is a very important topic for discussion today as we explore the rich diversity of crops in Africa that have sustained communities for generations, and we discuss their crucial role in building resilient food systems for the future. So the question is, why are we finding this so important at this time? After all, these discussions, these types of crops have been a point of discussion for many years. However, I think within the last couple of years, a number of different forums have had a lot of discussions around this. UN Food Systems Summit, the United Nations Food Systems, and more recently, the Vision for Adapted Crops and Soils working group of a number of different partners. And these have all underscored the vulnerabilities within Africa's food systems that arise from global economic and other shocks, such as COVID. I know it's hard to remember, about 4 years ago. Then there's the conflicts that are, abound right now. The war in Russia and Ukraine is one of those. Climate change, the loss of biodiversity, and compromised ecosystems. So these challenges have all led to increasing hunger, malnutrition, food insecurity, deteriorating human health, and they create a pressing humanitarian crisis across the African continent. And a lot of studies have been done around this within recent times, Afrobarometer, FAO, etc. In addition to the damaging effects of climate change, we also have challenges related to increasing soil degradation and severe reductions in soil health. So of concern and our interest today is really looking more closely at the relatively limited number of crops that people rely on for day-to-day consumption worldwide, but particularly in Africa. And one emerging potential solution has been to address this challenge by investing in the cultivation, value addition, and consumption of Africa's indigenous crops, indigenous and traditional crops, ITCs. These ITCs, as they have also been called, neglected and underutilized crop species, orphan crops, lost crops. A number of scientists have not necessarily loved the terminologies of orphan crops and lost crops, etc. But these have been used over time throughout the past decades to describe them. These are well adapted to local conditions. They are highly nutritious crops, and they are eaten by communities. They're already being consumed, but they're just not widely available. They are essential for regional food security, and they provide resilience to communities in the face of changing weather patterns. Some examples, I know that many people would know of these: sorghum, millet, bambara, groundnut, morama, milo. The list is long. And we will hear about some of these from our esteemed speakers today. I want to thank you all for joining us in this important conversation, and we look forward to hearing from all of the speakers today. Our program is hosted by two of AAP's consortium members, Michigan State University and the University of Dar es Salaam. Next slide. And the next one. I wanted to just go quickly now into some housekeeping. Please choose your preferred language. We are doing interpretation in French. And if you prefer to listen in either French or English uninterpreted, you can keep off the interpretation tab. If you are using a phone or a tablet, select your preferred channel, then tap Done. We are requesting you to use the question and answers feature and not the chat feature for your questions that we will address later on in the dialogue. Please use the Q&A feature for your questions, especially during the moderated questions part of the dialogue. You can use the chat to introduce yourselves, let us know where you're from, where you're working, which country you're based in, etc. A recording of this dialogue will be shared with all attendees at the end of the program in a day or two. Next slide. So this is our program today. We're going to begin with welcome remarks from Richard Makandaweri, who is the Director of the Alliance for African Partnership in our Africa office. The keynote address will be given by Agnes Mwanguela, the Deputy Vice Chancellor for the Lilongwe University of Agriculture and Natural Resources. And I will go through later what her specific topic will be. Innocencia John is at the University of Dar es Salaam in Tanzania. Lisa Timan is at Michigan State University. Maina Mosele is at the National Agricultural Research and Development Institute in Botswana. Mamsamba Mbai is from the University of Cheikh Anta Diop in Dakar, Senegal. Axel Schmidt is at the Crop Research Services, I believe it is called, CRS. And then we will have an open floor discussion and then some closing remarks. Next slide. So I just wanted to quickly go through what each of the speakers are going to be talking about today. So Agnes will look at, as the keynote speaker, she's going to focus on the nutritional benefits of indigenous and traditional crops. And this is actually one of the major reasons why we need to focus on investing in these types of crops, because of the benefits that we can derive from it. Next slide. Innocencia John is at UDSM. She's an economist, and she's going to speak on unlocking economic potential, market opportunities, and value chain development for indigenous crops. Next slide. Lisa Timan is a soil scientist. She's an associate professor in the Plant, Soil, and Microbial Sciences Department at Michigan State University. She will speak about agroecological practices for soil health and climate resilience, integrating indigenous crops. Next. Maina Mosele is the Director for Food Science and Technology at the National Agricultural Research and Development Institute in Botswana. She's a food scientist, and she will speak on identifying and commercializing indigenous foods in Botswana. Mamsamba is a plant scientist. He will speak to the research and program development to promote indigenous and traditional crops perspectives from West Africa. Next slide. And then we will end with Axel, who is an agricultural science and research advisor. And so I had the completely incorrect organization, agricultural science and research advisor at the Catholic Relief Services. He's a senior advisor there since 2010, and he has been providing advice to a number of different agencies. His presentation is on policy support or creating an enabling environment for indigenous crops, the key lessons. Next slide. So we will now be calling on, so when we will have then an open floor for question and answers. And that will be moderated by myself. And then we will close after the presentations. So the next speaker, and by the way, I forgot to introduce myself. My name is Jose Jackson Maleti, and I'm the co-director for the Alliance for African Partnership, and I'm based here in East Lansing at the MSU campus here. So our next speaker is Richard Mkandawire, who's going to give very brief welcome remarks, and he will share this now. Richard, are you on? Yes, you are.
Yes, I am. Yeah. No, thank you very much, Jose. Yeah, my name is Richard Mkandawire. I'm calling from Nairobi, where we just attended the summit of the heads of state and government in fertilizer and soil health. And this topic on indigenous crops was also featured very, very prominently. And I'll very shortly be speaking to that. But allow me to welcome, I think, our esteemed panelists from across Africa, but also globally, including our viewers from across the globe. I know Axel is in Lima. We're delighted that you're able to join us. And clearly, we see, I think, this dialogue as part of the growing movement towards, moving towards supporting, this extremely important subject on, supporting indigenous cropping systems, especially in Africa. As my colleague, who is the co-director of the Alliance for African Partnership, pointed out, this was actually also part of the position of the African position at the World Food System Summit in 2021, where there's acknowledgement that there's urgency in moving for the transformation of our food system by incorporating in this question around indigenous crops as well. And at the global level, again, there's growing interest. And, one of the key advocates of this, is Kare Fowler, whom, as we might have learned, will be receiving the World Food Prize for 2024 in Iowa this year. And I trust this consortium, evolving consortium of practitioners, researchers, and including maybe in future, we need to bring in activists, because they're very prominent in this space to be part of this movement, in promoting indigenous crops. So again, allow me the brevity of making that suggestion that it'll be good, for this consortium to reflect on the possibility of featuring this at the World Food Prize as well, maybe even at the African, food, food systems summit, which takes place under the umbrella of AGRF. It will be in Kigali in September. But beyond that, it is our interest as Alliance for African Partnership that we explore an opportunity of setting this one up as a continuous platform, where conversations, continue to be put on the table based on some of the research we're doing, but also some of the work that is actually happening, and also looking at other opportunities on how we might support countries which are moving towards promoting these indigenous crops. One of them is Malawi. It has already received some funding from IFAD, but again, this is actually money from the VAX, initiative. But there will be also additional funding going to other countries in Africa, and it will be extremely important that this consortium is part of supporting those countries. So we look forward to your contributions, and we also look forward to exploring that opportunity of being part of this movement in promoting indigenous crops and foods as well, not just in Africa, maybe across the globe as well, because there's increasing taste for African indigenous crops, even in the global north. And your contributions will really help us to chart the future of this exciting conversation, and indeed exciting initiative which as AAP would like to promote as a flagship of our programs. So thank you very much. We look forward to fruitful discussions in this dialogue. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Richard. So let's get right into today's dialogue. So our first speaker is Agnes Mwanguela, as we've heard, and she's going to give a presentation about the nutritional benefits of indigenous and traditional foods, crops, and she's going to focus on millets, melon seeds, and pulses. Agnes, please.
Thank you, Jose. As introduced, I'm Agnes Mwanguela, and I'm a food scientist, and they have been working on the utilization of mostly legumes and pulses, but also some underutilized species, especially the millets and sorghum. Okay, next. Okay, let's move to the next slide, please. I would like to, first of all, give an overview of the global malnutrition status, in that we are living in an era whereby the figures for malnutrition on the global level, they still remain staggeringly high. If you look at undernutrition, we are still, while globally it's at 22%, here in Africa, we are at 30%, and some countries are even higher than that. Apart from undernutrition, we are also having micronutrient deficiency, and the figures for anemia as an indicator of micronutrient deficiency has been stable, around 29% for women and 39% for children. There hasn't been much significant changes in the anemia figure as compared to undernutrition, where some decline has been observed. And of major concern also currently is the rising overweight and obesity global figures that are growing. And what is happening is that in most countries now, we are observing the coexistence of all these three forms of malnutrition. Next slide, please. And next slide, please. I would like to look at a study that was done in 2022, whereby there was a comprehensive analysis of demographic and health survey data from 23 African countries. And they were looking at the coexistence of the three different forms of malnutrition. This is very important because traditionally there was kind of demarcation whereby undernutrition and micronutrient deficiency was prevalent in the poor and least developed countries, while the developed economies were struggling with overweight and obesity. But this study established and demonstrated that the trend is now changing, whereby we are having coexistence of all the three forms of malnutrition, even in developing countries. Next slide, please. So in the coexistence, it's referred to as either triple burden or double burden of malnutrition, and this is prevalent within a country. You can also have it within rural and urban areas in a country, and even within families, there is diversity where you have young families versus older families. And also another aspect is that of middle to high income families and low versus low income households. If you look at the table that is shared, you will see that the figures are across both for undernutrition, overweight, anemia, and then the coexistence of these conditions within families. Where it's indicating double burden, it means there is within a same household, you have overweight in the maternal figure in the household and underweight or undernutrition in the children under 5, just emphasizing the coexistence of these malnutrition conditions within the same household. The next slide, please. Apart from coexistence within the household, the triple burden or double burden can also even exist within an individual, where you can have a person who is stunted, anemic, and overweight. So this complicates the whole situation in the way of how we manage such conditions in terms of making sure that we provide for the different categories of the household members, as well as for the nutritional needs of the individuals within those households. Next slide, please. Next slide. Yeah, so this situation of having these conditions is contributed by quite a number of changes that are taking place in the food system, which include food household and national food insecurity, as well as climate change related disasters, disruptions in the food supply chains, as alluded earlier, but also even transitions in food consumption behavior among people. A study that was conducted by IFPRI has clearly demonstrated the increase in high density sugar sweetened and refined food products that are being found even in rural areas within Africa. So all these are contributing to all 3 types of malnutrition being present even among the rural households in Africa. The other aspect is the availability and the affordability of foods, of unhealthy food choices among families. Next slide, please. And this is where now it brings us to the alternative or the options that we have in a traditional food crops that are available already in Africa. As Africa, we have a quite wide variety of food crops, both in cereals, roots and tubers, fruits and vegetables, and legumes and pulses. The challenge is that these products are either underproduced or they are not readily available on the market, or they still require a lot of time to process, and there isn't much variety in terms of food options that households can now utilize. Another thing that is also affecting the utilization of these underutilized crops is the loss of the knowledge that is there, in that people who are knowledgeable about these are not yet passing the information or the knowledge to the younger generation. Next, please. Next slide. So yet these foods are good sources of macronutrients, energy. They are a good source of micronutrients. And in addition to just providing the nutritional benefits, they also provide functional and healthy properties that are crucial in dealing with the diet-related non-communicable diseases that are coming because of the overnutrition. But also they speak to the emerging challenges that we are facing, that is in terms of climate change, as well as the use of pesticides and chemicals in the production system. Next, please. So I'll be sharing some of the work and presentations that we've made on the millets and the other passes. The first thing that we need to note is that for the people to appreciate the importance of these traditional crops, there is need for nutrient data, and good quality and comprehensive nutrient data is inadequate. In most food composition databases, there is either only raw products and there isn't much on the recipes that use underutilized foods. But even for those foods that are in the food composition databases, most of them have incomplete profile. And this makes it difficult for the practitioners to properly promote and utilize these underutilized crops or traditional crops. So one thing that is very important is that we need to have comprehensive nutrient data on the traditional crops. Next. Next slide, please. Hello. Okay. Last year we had last year was the year of the millet, and we had prepared a paper on some nutritional benefits of millet, and this was part of the Society for National Nutrition Education and Behavior. Can you go to the next slide? So I would like to share some of the items that we covered at that time, and the emphasis on the nutritional benefits of the millets. Millets are a good source of proteins, carbohydrates, and can be utilized for infant and young child feeding. And you will notice that when used in a complement, they can provide good quality protein. And in both whether it's finger millet or pear millet, they will provide high protein comparable to that protein that is used for milk. And studies that have been conducted have demonstrated that you can achieve healthy growth in children when you feed them complementary foods consisting of millets and sorghum, millets and pigeon peas or chickpeas, or which are underutilized. We go to the next slide, please. And apart from providing the macronutrients that can support growth, millets also are a good source of micronutrients such as iron, zinc, and calcium. And not only are they a good source of these micronutrients, but they are also of higher bioavailability comparable to other typical plant-based diets. As such, there shouldn't be any disadvantage in utilizing these millets in a diet. We go to the next slide, please. A systematic review of data has shown that millets can be used in the management and prevention of type 2 diabetes, hyperlipidemia, and even support growth in children. And all this work demonstrates the versatility of millets, which in a way makes it a cause that we can promote their consumption. If we look at a big survey that was consumer study that was conducted in India by ICRISAT, it demonstrated that the biggest reason why consumers were consuming millet was that because it is good for managing a healthy condition. And in most cases, they are looking at either lowering the glycemic index on their diet or losing weight. And all these are benefits that have been demonstrated with the consumption of the millet. The glycemic load or the low glycemic index of the millet is attributed to the resistant starch that is contained by these millets, as well as the dietary fiber. They are very rich in dietary fiber. And because of these properties, millets can help to reduce the development of cardiovascular diseases by reducing total cholesterol and also decreasing bad cholesterol within the diet. We go to the next slide. Another study that I also wanted to share with you is that of for the pulses, where this was a study that we conducted here in Malawi, quite a variety of pulses that farmers were producing. But what was the unique was that most of the pulses, even though they're a good source of protein, most of it was going for sale. And that's one of the challenges, that even though households were producing these pulses, they are not benefiting from the nutritional benefits within the household. And as a result, we'll see that there is a need for extension services, as well as the providing information to households on how they can process and utilize the pulses. And mostly these pulses are still being consumed in one form, that is as a stew. Another study that we just completed late last year was on cucurbit seed, which is known as egusi in West Africa. And an analysis of these cucurbits indicated that they are quite a good source of protein, crude protein, and crude fat. We're talking of 40% fat and around 20 to 30% crude protein, which is quite significant source of nutrients. So in all, you can see that these indigenous and traditional foods are a good source of nutrition, and they speak to most of the nutrition trends, the food and nutrition trends that are carrying currently on the market, speaking to issues of sustainability, lack of allergens, climate, and also the fact that they have short supply chains, because they are mostly consumed in the regions where they are produced. So in conclusion, I would like to comment that as we move forward, we need to look at consumer value. What would it take for the consumer to take on these traditional foods? They are looking beyond the nutritional benefits, but they would want to have palatability, convenience, variety of products, and the food has to be available and accessible at the same time. And we also need to work on knowledge and technology transfer, as well as the research and technology innovations to develop new varieties or improve performance of the existing varieties, processing and utilization, as well as the enabling environment, especially when you look at the standard and the food-based guidelines that can make these nutrient-rich foods available. But one of the questions that I would want to make is that as we work on developing products and making the traditional foods available, we should not compromise on the issues of having these foods highly refined or increase their sugar and their fat intake, in that it would counteract the benefits that are accorded to traditional foods. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Agnes, for that presentation. So we are not going to take questions right now. We will continue with our panel now, and then we will have questions at the end. So our next speaker is Innocentia John, and she's going to speak on unlocking economic potential, market opportunities, and value chain development for indigenous crops. Innocentia, you're on.
Thank you, Joseph. Thank you for the introduction. I'm Innocentia John from the University of Dar es Salaam, an economist, and I'll be presenting on how we can unlock this potential by looking at the market opportunities that are there and what are those value chains that we need to look at in terms of developing and unlocking that potential with indigenous crops. As it has been said, we now understand what are indigenous crops. They are either sometimes called orphan crops, or they are sometimes referred to as neglected, but all these crops are traditional crops that are actually specifically identified from a certain region, and they are always traditional to our diet. In Africa, we have more than 100 indigenous crops, and building on this specific case in Tanzania, we have more than 25 of these crops that are actually being identified, and they range from legumes, trees, fruits, and vegetables. What we did, we tried to understand, first of all, what is actually known to us in terms of indigenous crops. What do they actually possess? So they have an economic, environmental, cultural, and nutritional benefit. And one of the other things we identified was that most of the farms in Tanzania are actually dominated by monoculture type of cultivation, where majority of these crops are actually exotic crops. And in this regard, exotic crops are crops that are actually non-traditional, and they have been there for a while. So we went on to explore the untapped potential of these crops by trying to understand the value chain of indigenous crops. How did we do this? How do we actually unlock that potential? So first of all, we tried to map what are these indigenous crops that are actually found in Tanzania by looking at those different agroecological zones where these crops are actually grown, and where are they not grown, but they actually have that particular potential to actually be grown. And then we later on try to understand what are those challenges and opportunities in terms of the value chain of these indigenous crops. So these crops are a range of grains, vegetables, fruits, tubers like cassava, sweet potatoes. We have trees like the moringa and the baobab. We have fruits like the monkey orange and the jackfruit. We have a number of vegetables like amaranthus. So why should we care about indigenous crops? There's a huge disconnect in terms of market. The crops are being produced, but are they really reaching the market? Some of the crops are reaching the market, some are not reaching the market. What about the processing technologies and the value addition knowledge in terms of how can we add value to these crops so that we can actually promote and create awareness so that they can have a recognition to these consumers that are actually consuming them, as one of the issues that is actually lacking? What about research and knowledge in terms of the knowledge that's available along the value chain? And do we have support from the government in terms of the policies that are there? Do they actually recognize indigenous crops? So what we did is, first we tried to understand for these different crops, just a few of them, where are they actually grown? So we ended up realizing that some of these crops are actually grown in areas that are sometimes not even suitable, but they are there. But in some areas, for instance, pigeon pea, you find that there are areas which are very suitable for the cultivation of pigeon pea, but they're actually not present. So you see that we identify a huge potential in terms of production of these crops, where they can actually be grown and where they can actually be grown, but they're not actually being grown right now in terms of production. And then we went further to look at now if it's being grown at the at the farm level. What's the price at the farm level? Now, building on a typical case of jackfruit in Tanzania, if you take an 8 kilogram jackfruit, you find it for 40 cents US dollars. But looking at an international market, the same fruit packed well, you find it for more than $10, some of them even $18. So you realize that a lot of these fruits are actually being lost along the chain. So there are markets in Dar es Salaam where you find a lot of these fruits, but they are not actually being consumed. So there is a huge loss in terms of they get rotten and nobody is consuming them. So there are very few people who actually understand the value of a jackfruit. We recently have a PhD student that's actually trying to establish the micronutrient levels and how we can actually add value to the jackfruit so that we can actually increase its consumption. So the value is there, but how can we internalize this value to make sure that the farmer actually gets what they're actually meant to get in terms of the crop that they possess? Looking at how these indigenous crops, for instance, cowpea. Cowpea has a huge potential in terms of how it increases soil fertility, the diverse uses that it has for the different households, from using the leaves as green vegetables, from using the peas to make different snacks, from using the peas to make different stews. So you realize that households actually understand the potential of actually diversifying their farms. And more than 73 of these farmers are actually diversifying their farms to make sure that at least they have more than one crop in their farms, showing that there is a huge correlation between their household food diversity and the diversification that they actually have in their farms, bringing out a huge potential in identifying among those crops that are actually being diversified, which ones are actually indigenous. And realize that a lot of farmers do actually have a diversification aspect, though there is a huge market issue in terms of how they transpose and link that crop all the way to the market. So the key question will be, so knowing all this, how do we actually unlock that full potential? What we need is to raise awareness, as it has been said by the keynote speaker, on what are those nutrient values in terms of the benefit that these crops have. What's that market value that can be linked all the way from the producers of these crops at the local level, all the way to different markets, either it's a regional market or it's an international market, so that we can actually boost the production, as most farmers are more linked to improving their livelihoods in a way to generate income. And what is that type of recognition that we actually need, or support that we need from the government in terms of investing on how we can actually research and improve these crops, so that we can actually make sure that if we understand the nutritional values, we understand that the price that they can get in the market, how can we actually reduce that gap? So how should we do this? One of the key things from the finding is that there's very, very, very little investment in terms of value addition of these crops. So we need the companies, different companies, to actually think of ways they can actually add value to some of these crops. And we need to see ways we can actually empower small commercial vegetable growers in terms of to increase that either consumption and production of indigenous crops. And then if we have the crops, what are those different utilization ways that we can actually use? So can we think of recipes of these indigenous crops that food vendors can actually incorporate in their food production, so that customers can actually be aware in consuming these in these crops? And as a capacity building issue, should we encourage school gardens in schools so that students can actually grow these crops and then have them incorporated in their feeding programs in a way they can also even sell the surplus that they have? So in a way that the school gets income, at the same time we increase the food production and promote the awareness of these crops. So it's an effort that requires everyone in play. We need the farmers to understand that they can produce these crops and have a market for it. We need different actors like the government in play. We need the academicians to research on this. We need NGOs. We need a lot of stakeholders, everyone to actually play in, so that we can actually make sure that we reduce that gap that exists between what is actually being produced in the market, so that we can actually create a value of these crops in the market. I would like to thank different collaborators who actually helped in financing and working in this project that did run for 2 years, and we are still working on so many of the results. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Innocentia. Very useful information for us. So we're going to keep right along so that we are keeping on time. The next speaker is Lisa Tiemann, and she's going to speak on agroecological practices for soil health and climate resilience and integrating indigenous crops. Lisa?
Great. Okay. Thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here and chatting with you all this morning. And I am going to talk a little bit about the role that indigenous crops and reintroducing some of these crops into smallholder farming systems, the role they can play in improving soil health. So I'm going to just sort of jump right in here, and we have a lot of practices that we can already point to or think about when we talk about whether it's conservation agriculture, climate smart agriculture, building more sustainable systems, building soil health. They're all kind of fit into this same picture. And so I just have here on the screen, a nice little image of some of those practices that tend to reduce soil health or reduce sustainability, and those that promote soil health or increase the sustainability and typically the resilience of a system. And what I want to do today is, of course, focus on those practices that diversify the system. That includes cover crops or relay crops or diverse crop rotations or including perennial crops. But in this context, what we would be adding in are indigenous crops to the system. The reason that this is so important is it's sort of one of our basic pillars or fundamental ways that we can think about improving soils and addressing this issue of soil degradation and decline that is so prevalent in Africa. We know that there are, again, basic practices, and diversifying your system is one of those practices that we know can really have some positive impacts and benefits. And so when you think about diversifying, again, using crop rotations or cover crops or intercropping or however you want to do that in your system. So if we're growing indigenous crops, in intercropping systems, or again, if we're doing some kind of rotation or in between the cash crop, it provides for a greater diversity of habitat and niches for different kinds of soil biota. It also provides different kinds of organic matter inputs and food sources for those biota. So you're generally increasing the activity and the diversity of those organisms in the soil that really determine how healthy your soil is going to be. And then one of the other big things as part of soil health is by having these different kinds of crops in the system and this cropping diversity, we also help to make sure that a single soil-borne pathogen can't proliferate in the system. So I just wanted to share with you a little bit of evidence for the benefits of increasing cropping system diversity. So this is from a meta-analysis that I participated in. It's been quite a few years ago, about a decade ago now, but I think the take-home here is pretty clear that across a very wide range of different cropping systems, across all of the studies that we could find across the globe, we see that just going from a monoculture to some kind of crop rotation. So instead of having just one crop in the system, going to 2 or more crops has a big benefit in the system, and you can actually see an increase in total soil carbon. So we're increasing soil organic matter, increasing soil carbon. This is on average by about 3.5%, and that's just diversifying the system. And one of the reasons for that, and then you can see here, is that by diversifying the system, we're taking care of those microbes and the life that lives in the soil. And so this measurement here, this is microbial biomass measurements. And the microbial biomass, by diversifying the system, actually increased by about 21% on average. So really just diversifying the system itself has these important benefits. Another way to look at this, in another study that I did here in Michigan, was looking at, the diversity of our cropping system in relation to the functional diversity of microbes or the community diversity. And we can see that as we increase that cropping system diversity, again, we are adding to that diversity in our soils, and so different microbes and all of the different functions that we need. This can help contribute to resilience, because if we have this diversity in the system, then if we have adverse and abnormal conditions, very severe drought or even very severe flooding, chances are then we're going to have those microbes already in the system that can handle that diversity and still provide those services that are so important, like nutrient cycling, and nutrient provisioning. So this diversity of the microorganisms in the system is really a critical component. But then, of course, building that base for our soils to function, which is soil organic matter, is also critically important. And we find that when we have these higher diversity systems, we have more microbial diversity, we have more microbial activity. And at the end of the day, what that does is it actually increases the total amount of soil organic matter. And I have that represented here. You can see the total amount of soil carbon that builds up in these systems is also increased. So not only are we building this base with this soil organic matter to help improve soil health and improve the functioning of our soils, but we're putting carbon back into the soil. And we think about climate change and mitigating climate change, rebuilding those stocks of soil carbon is a critical component for that, as well as improving soil health. And so I just also wanted to quickly show some evidence regarding, building the resilience of the system by increasing the cropping system diversity. And so this was a colleague of mine, Tim Bowles, did this really nice study that showed that across the US, across a bunch of different systems where they had experimentally manipulated and increased the system diversity or the cropping diversity, they saw that there's an increase in yield resiliency in the face of extreme weather events, particularly in the face of drought. And so if you can see here in these graphs, we have this rotation complexity index. You can think of that as sort of the diversity of the system. And as you increase the diversity of the system, you can see across most of these systems that we have an increase in maize yields when you increase the diversity of the system overall. And then the other thing that you get is this benefit where you have positive impacts when you have some kind of a stressful condition. And so again, you can see across most all of these systems, when some kind of a stressful condition happens, usually it's a drought, then you still have this positive impact and you have better yields in those systems that are more diverse when they have to go up against these climate change shocks. And this is also another way to look at this is an increased risk of crop failure versus an increased opportunity for a bumper crop. And you can see in general those complex systems or the more diverse cropping systems, you're going to have more chance, more opportunities for higher yields and less opportunities for crop failure. So I think that's all I had for today. I just want to end there. I didn't want to take too much time, but I just wanted to quickly highlight, the important benefits of diversifying cropping systems from the perspective of system sustainability and improving soil health. So we have some pretty good evidence for that. Most of that work has been done in the global north, but we assume that those same kinds of benefits will hold as we try to reintegrate some of these indigenous crops into African systems. But again, it would be nice if we had the resources to actually do similar kinds of research to really see what are the best combinations, what is sort of the level of diversity that we need to shoot for. I know in most of the global north cropping systems, you don't have to diversify all that much. And we're talking about, instead of a monoculture, maybe having 2 or 3 crops in rotation, maybe adding some cover crops or intercrops. But we don't really know for sure what the best systems and combinations are across Africa. So that's something that does need some further thought and research. But I'll end there and hopefully can take some questions at the end. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lisa. We appreciate your presentation. I'd just like to add here that our sponsors, our co-hosts for this dialogue are Michigan State University, University of Dar es Salaam, and the Lilongwe University of Agriculture and Natural Resources. So we move on now to the next speaker, who is Maina Mosele. She's from the organization called NARDI in Botswana, and she's going to speak on identifying and commercializing indigenous foods in Botswana. Maina?
Am I audible?
Yes.
Okay, let me start my presentation. I'm going to share on identifying and commercializing indigenous crops in Botswana. I'm from the Department of Food Science and Technology. Just to give a background, NARDI is a fairly new organization which was formed by a Botswana government directive of 2015, merging very old institutions such as the Department of Agricultural Research, the Botswana National Veterinary Lab, and the National Food Technology Research Center. And the aim of NARDI is to increase the contribution of agriculture to Botswana's GDPs to improve the utilization of natural products and agricultural produce, fostering inclusion and knowledge transfer initiatives, and also to provide innovative solutions and adaptation to climate change and yield improvement, as well as commercialization of agriculture across Botswana agricultural zones. Yes, the question is, how do we then identify which crops to commercialize? We normally do surveys. We also do stakeholder engagements in our institution. And to discuss further, I'm just going to look at the stakeholder engagements. In our stakeholder engagements, we have in-house projects where we make sure that our stakeholders are part of the projects. One such project is the RESAID project, which is called the Improving Agricultural Resilience to Salinity through Development and Promotion of Pro-Poor Technologies. And this project is funded by the Center for Biosaline Agriculture, and it's also sponsored by the International Fund for Agricultural Development and the Arab Bank for Economic Development in Africa, where the project is actually looking at solutions in which salinization of agricultural land can be reduced. And Botswana, Mozambique, Namibia, Togo, Sierra Leone, Liberia, and Gambia are part of this project. What you see there is a cake whereby one of the farmers that we were training used 100% sorghum flour. What we do in that project is that we teach farmers, selection and production of crops that can adapt to the climatic conditions in that area. So we are mostly working with sorghum, millet, tapari bean, and cowpea. The picture below that, I don't know if you can see my cursor. Can you see my cursor there?
Yes, we can see it.
Yes, yeah. The bottle that I'm pointing at is where farmers used tapari bean to come up with a braai relish, or in other words, barbecue relish. And here we have millet biscuits. Here we have sorghum muffins. And here we have a tomato puree. Here we are working with farmers and teaching them how to use crops and vegetables that they had grown at that particular time at their farms. Yes, this is a very good initiative, but the challenge that we see is how farmers then move some of these value-added products into the commercial space. And we see the government having many efforts to try and do that. There's been one new initiative that was started by the Citizen Entrepreneurship Development Agency in the last month, and we hope that it will help some of these research initiatives actually find place in the commercial space. Another way of actually working, I don't think my cursor is moving the way I want it to move. I'm having a technical hiccup. Let me try on the screen. Another way of stakeholder engagement is by, having community engagements where we work with communities in selection and production of crops that are specific to the agroecological zones, similar to a project that we are doing under RESAID. And now we see a lot of women becoming really interested when we go to different communities in value addition, and a lot of the unemployed youth. So what we normally encourage them, especially those that do not have farming land, is for them to look at the value products that are available in their own communities. And apart from just teaching them about value addition, here we see a baobab drink. And then on my right, we see a Morula pulp juice. These are local products that have now entered into the commercial space. Apart from just teaching them value addition, we also teach them domestication of these crop wild relatives and wild fruit plants that are there in Botswana. Currently, we are working with Tylosema esculentum, which is moramabin, where now we've seen that a lot of products can come out of it. And now we are doing some domestication trials. We're working also with amaranthus. We're also working with baobab. We're also working with musukujani. Musukujani is Lipia javanica, where we are trying to come up with iced teas, products that are similar to your mainland products, such as those based from ribose. I hope I'm not too fast for the interpreters. Another way where we have stakeholder engagement is whereby we work with our customers. There at the top, you see a product which is made from Citrullus lanatus. This is a fruit or vegetable, if you like, which in the previous years, it used to be used as animal feed, especially pigs and donkeys during drought times. But now, after people have realized that it has so much commercial value, we see that the price of the raw material has gone high, and it's actually makes a very good puree mixed with sour milk, which is normally used to make a product in weddings and funerals. And we see this product now on the shelves, and anybody now can access it. So what we do with our customers, we do nutritional analysis for labeling purposes. We also do food safety analysis. We do sensory evaluation, and we do shelf life studies. Below that bottle, there are peanut butter tubs from a local company, which we are currently negotiating with them to see if we can have a contract with them for food safety analysis and shelf life studies as they continue expanding their business. One of the things that the keynote speaker, Dr. Agnes, was talking about is as we work with these indigenous products, we should try by all means not to compromise their nutritional value. We have a company called Mongo Craft in Botswana that have gone beyond the national market and are now exporting to the US through the AGOA protocol, and also exporting to other parts of the world. You will see that when you look at the bottle there, it says 50% more fruit, and it says reduced sugar. And another product on my right says it has no added salt. And I think this is a very interesting scenario, because when you look at competing products in the market, if you go on the shelf and you pick any gem, you'll realize that the first ingredients you would see is water, followed by sugar and a colorant. And what we see is that a lot of the entrepreneurs that are going into value addition of our local crops or indigenous materials are actually trying to maintain as much of the natural flavor and natural uses as much as possible. And I think the major attributing factor is that in Botswana, we have limited access to most of the preservatives. So instead of it being a curse, it is actually a blessing for us, because we find that now those that are in the industry are actually using natural methods of rendering our products safe for consumption through using methods such as pasteurization and hot filling. So thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for your attention. And as we do domestication of these indigenous materials, one of the things that we have realized over the years in one of the projects that we did with the local agricultural institute was that trying to take some of these veal products from where they grow naturally into the experimental site poses a huge problem. So I think also it is a natural defense from the plants themselves to say, you know, domesticate me where I am, so that then we are in a way forced to improve the livelihoods of the people in those areas, so that we can actually see development, you know, going all over the country instead of just centering around major areas and major urban areas and major research institutions. Thank you so much.
You're muted, Jose.
Oh, thank you. I was saying to her, thank you very much. And she took me back to my days at NAFTEC and other food-related institutions in Botswana and the great work that has been done there. So we are going to move along because we are a little bit behind in time. So we're going to have Prof. Mamsamba Mbaye from UCAD in Senegal to speak on their program that they are using to promote indigenous and traditional foods in West Africa. Thank you, Mamsamba. Do we have his slides? Okay, great.
You have the slide? Yes, thank you. Thank you, Jose, for having me here. And thank you to AAP, the management team. Thank you also to the Luana and University of Dar es Salaam for organizing this very important session. I'm going just to talk about research in the global aspects in Africa, and also here in our country and in West Africa, what we intend to do with AAP and other partners. I'm joining from University Cheikh Anta Diop of Dakar, which is the first Francophone university in Senegal. And we have about 90,000 students and a lot of faculty members and staff members to work with training in very various aspects and research and also community services. I'm going just to talk about just a very quick context. All the previous presenters have talked about them, and also see what are the brief analysis of the research aspects and how to develop the program that we are trying to develop here and with some partners to promote indigenous and tropical and traditional, crops. As I said, in our world and our continent, we are now experiencing some global challenges such as rapid population growth, health concern, climate change, gender issues. And it is known that in 2015, we will be 9.7 billion of people, and about 70% of food will be needed to feed all the people. And these challenges led to food nutrition and food and nutrition and security because of lack of availability, accessibility, and so on. And now there is an increased national consensus on transforming agri-food systems with some systems increasing the efficiency, the inclusiveness, resilience, and sustainability. This transformation requires innovative solutions and paradigm change. Because we have to go beyond the staple crops that are we use in our environment. So we have just 4 or 5 species that are cultivated and that on which we are relying for our food. We need to go beyond and to promote indigenous and traditional crops, and more widely neglected and underutilized species now. But these crops and these kind of species have received very little attention by the global scientific community, even if now we are working more and more on these species. The research is supposed now to play a vital role in producing knowledge and innovation in all areas of research. And as in Africa, research, we have world-class research because we are in partnership with very interesting institutions worldwide who have very good skills. But Africa have a very low contribution to publication, less than 30%, and we have some top countries: South Africa, Egypt, Nigeria. And in the field of indigenous and traditional crops, we have a loss of local knowledge. Some say some erosion of the knowledge. The lack of research, lack of communication, and limited market opportunity. I have followed very well the previous presentation, and those one who are working on this market opportunity. But as I say, there is a growing interest on ITC by agricultural researchers, breeders, policymakers, and things like this. In West Africa, it's the same thing. We are creating and sharing new varieties, working and developing some more researches. I myself have running two projects on this with some partners, the Forest Project, Food and Livelihood Resilience for Neglected and Underutilized Species. I'm working on it with South Africa, University of Pretoria, and also with Japan. We have also the valorization of neglected and underutilized species in Senegal, funded by the World Bank through its Center of Excellency, Agriculture and Nutrition. And now for promoting these ITCs, the challenges and the constants that can be addressed are very, very, very large. Biotic constant, seed system, dietary behavior, insufficiency of technology, generation and adoption. Some of the previous presenters said that you have to produce, but you have to produce food that maintain the quality. The poor market access and very long list of things that we have to address by research. And for this, I think that we have 3 levels of research. The first level is before trying to produce a crop. What are the knowledge we have on food and on indigenous and traditional crops? How to avoid the food erosion and the crop erosion, and to see how to assess and manage the local knowledge by doing surveys, by doing the distribution and mapping and surveying the traditional technology. The second level is to produce scientific aspects, scientific knowledge for crop and food availability from the farm to the fork, and by mastering biology, ecology, geology, with science, and so on. And the third one is the transversal issues with policies, laws, economy, financial aspects, information and communication, digitalization, the use of artificial intelligence to access to very diversified food crop and food. Okay, with me, for this, we are working on a program to try to mobilize the resources to meet the major challenges on the indigenous and traditional crop field by working with various stakeholders and to try to connect the training, the research, and the outreach to do sustainable development. And now this program is being built. And what I think is that we have to bring to the same table all the scientists. And in that case, we have to produce information, good information that are safe, that are environmentally sustainable, and things like this. And for this, the first component of the program will be the knowledge assessment and data management. You have to take local and scientific knowledge to identify and access research results and local knowledge that can be translated into innovation and build databases. And in this program, we have other components. The third one is training, because we have to train the next level generation of scientists who can work on this. And through these projects, we can find resources to do this training very good. Also, we need to translate all scientific results that we will have into innovation that can be used by the population. And the first one is to produce food and crops in an integrated and sustainable way that can respect environment, respects the health, and then be safe to be used. And after we have all that is going on transversal aspects that we need to bring with us the communities, the fifth one, the relations with the communities, because we have to bring them on the table very early to do the construction program. But also we have to bring special on health, environment, and food and nutrition sciences, and try to work with sociological, socio-economical, political, financial scientists, and then work on sustainable and dissemination and sustainable production of results, and to work on dissemination of these results. Here is some this project that we are working on to build it and to see how to bring with us partners, because for working on this, we need participative approach, equitable partnership. We need co-construction. We need to establish real relation with the community, and to enhance it also the engagement, and also to involve the right stakeholders at the right time. But also we need fundraising strategy. Richard asked me last time to work on this kind of project in West Africa, and we have to see some partners who are interested to try to build this kind of programs and bring scientists of different areas to work together to produce very important results to be used by our communities to promote these indigenous and traditional crops, but also to address food and security problems, to address food sovereignty problems also. I would like now to finish my presentation by thanking all the attendees, but also thanking the organizers, as I said in the previous presenter. Thank you, Joseph.
Thank you so much, Mamsamba. This was very useful information for us to know about what's happening in other parts of the continent and what you're planning on working on. So our final presenter today is Axel, who's going to speak on the policy support and creating an enabling environment for indigenous crops and some key lessons from that.
Yeah, hello, Jose, thank you. I think I cannot share my my screen because my previous speaker is still sharing his screen. I think Zoom is not allowing this.
Mamsamba, could you, or Justin, perhaps you can stop sharing for Mamsamba? Right, good. Thank you very much. Axel, you're on.
I'm trying to share, see if this is working. Please
Yes,
tell
it
me
is
if,
working. Yes, we can see it. Thank you.
Can you see it now? No, I think I have to change my, no, this is not how it works. I'm sorry. Excuse me.
Is it view
Excuse me.
options?
No, it is basically because I'm
Yes, now
working
it's
with-
good. Well, we're seeing the,
So now you should see the
Yes.
right thing.
yes.
Yeah,
Perfect.
I'm sorry for this confusion. Good morning, everybody from Lima. I guess it's the fate of the speaker who comes last to have another, some minutes left, and also the difficulty to summarize a bit the things which were already said without, repeating it. I will try to see, that I do it a short overview of the policy support and enabling environment elements we are thinking at CRS as key lessons for the promotion and the use of this indigenous and traditional crops, as you call it. And my previous speakers, they already mentioned that there are a lot of names out there for this. But in any case, we started looking at this from a perspective of why are these indigenous and traditional crops abandoned in the first place? And we think that that they were abandoned because producers focused on fewer, more profitable crops, and as consumers preferred more convenient crops, that could be more easily processed into food products. That's the main reason. And if you look at the chat, I think Carlos Iglesias from North Carolina already made a point saying, the new generation, they might not be so interested in having, the same time and dedication to cooking as perhaps a previous generation. So we have to look at this ITCs then from a point of, what does the consumer really prefer, and how can we create products that respond to this demand? Because as my previous speakers also said, we have to connect to markets. The other part which we think is important to look at in this context is, what are the current problems with them? Some were mentioned already, the lack of markets, the low profit, volatile prices, lack of regulations and policies, which I will try to look at. Also, the lack of post-harvest and processing technologies, together with low productivity. This all is a summary of problems a lot of farmers are facing, and also development partners. There is a big aspect of policy in this, and as we see it, there is a need to have a more holistic approach to policy. And I think that makes it a bit more complicated and more complex, because we see there are different aspects which has to be covered. And I will try, not only to look at the market demands and the processing infrastructure, but also look into research and extension, finance aspects, the connection to the health sector, which was already mentioned, Some words about germplasm and important seed systems, points and elements, then the awareness raising and promotion, and also then back to production, back to what Lisa already mentioned about the soil and water management components of all of this. Our main point here, by making this all work, enabling environment and policies, for us, it's the market demand. How do we create this demand? And we think that we have to create the demand because at the moment, there is not really a lot of demand. And now everybody is just trying to, we identify some crops, we do some products, and then we look for the markets. I think we have to do the reverse thing. We have to listen to the demands of a growing and dynamic population, which is basically in Africa also a youth component and the growing middle class. So they have certain, let's say, preferences. They are looking for certain products and consumer. We have to look at the consumer profiles. In one of my last visits in Africa, a colleague from Africa said, my children, they like, all of these Western style, snacks and whatsoever, really nice and packaged and, freely available. And so if we can, create an environment where we can identify, where we can define these consumer profiles, where we can look at these, let's say, parts of the population which might be, a growing, which is the basis of a growing demand, then perhaps, we could also create a really, a good way forward, enabling these environments to make the ITCs work. And you can see at the left, a good example of how this can be done. And here a great shout out to the people, the colleagues at SIP with Jan Low and Maria Andrade and her team. Sweet potato, orange flesh, sweet potato in Africa took off very well. And there you can see at the left, a lot of these products also related to orange flesh sweet potato. And I think that is a good example of how can we do this also in relationship to, the modern communication strategies to create awareness about these. We have to speak to these groups in the population so they can get aware of and see, what is the value added when they are buying and consuming this. We have to also rely on the promotion through chefs and ambassadors for this, and also look at to initially create demand, the use of public procurement procedures to create demand, hospital meals, school feeding programs were already mentioned. And then we have also to consider some tax regulations in the policy area, on ITCs and derived products for that, just to give them a head start on it. So when we look then at the value chain, when we work backwards from the consumer profile, how does this product look like? Then working back through the value chains, we also have to look from the policy perspective into the key players there. And one of the key players, I think, are these micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises. And I think until we do not equally support them, ITCs foods wouldn't be available, nor affordable and accessible, and not responding to demand by consumers. These MSMEs are often called the hidden middle. I think we need to recognize them as change makers rather than only as operators in the value chain. I think we have to create this policy support for them to better and for a better environment for these MSMEs so they can thrive. And I think they're the main actors, as I said, of change. So we have to look at this hidden middle when we talk about policies and enabling environments along the value chain. I think this is one of the key elements we have to address. Then in addition, of course, we have to look at food safety. It was already mentioned about policies enabling environment for aggregation and processing, not to forget standards and labeling. And I think all of that is coming together also with some public-private partnerships with supermarkets and other processing and selling entities. there it comes also about the quality control. But also we have to look how government, how people can support the development of infrastructure for all of this, cold storage chains, processing plants, and even, you know, simple roads access to markets, and roads for, you know, have access and delivery of inputs as well. I think these are still some basic, but still very valuable, you know, policy areas where government and others can you know, create this enabling environment so people can thrive on also on this market connections on ITCs. Another important part, which was not really mentioned throughout this session today, is the seed system. A lot of these ITCs rely on informal seed systems. The formal seed sector is not picking this up. At the moment, you know, there are problems on the access and the quality. We have then also a lot of regulations and certifications which make it difficult for farmers, you know, to get into the seed business and to provide the seed everybody would need if we really want to create a market and satisfy a market demand. So we have to work on the policy side on, let's say, schemes, farmer schemes with farmer seed production schemes and certification schemes, which are available, accessible for farmers, because without seed, I think we cannot do it. We can rely on, you know, what we already know from community-based seed banks, and we also have to rely on germplasm collections and storage. You know, I can relate here to the CG banks, the biggest holder of germplasm, also of these ITCs. Going further to another aspect of the policy environment, obviously it was mentioned, is finance. I think we need blended finance mechanisms, you know, supported by government to de-risk investments. We need more access to financial services to make sure that the production is really happening and the delivery to the market is necessary. The investments in packaging and so forth to meet the consumer profile, the product profile, we need to have there a better service available for our producers and the organization of our producers. You know, we need financial education, we need more microfinance schemes. There is a lot of, let's say, experience out there. We from CRS, we have started with our silk groups, with the saving groups, which also have a high impact on the availability of investments in different, let's say, products or production schemes. So another important element when we talk about ITCs is, you know, how can we start blended finance mechanisms to de-risk the whole investment from the very beginning. Added in also another, let's say, investment area where government and policy, you know, needs to come in for, you know, to create these public products. We need more investment in research and education. More research innovation are needed to evaluate and ensure the availability of nutrients in these crops. We heard so many good things about these crops, but we have to see also, will they be available if they are, you know, like processed, if they are stored, what will be the change in the nutritional value and so forth. So, you know, we need much more investment in research, you know, to ensure and deliver scalability in the harvesting, processing, and distribution of these crops. So another big, you know, challenge. As you can see, we're adding up a lot of elements which seems to be important to make ITCs work for smallholders and for the consumer in the countries. You know, as I said at the beginning, let's start with the consumer profile. Let's start with the demand in the market and then work our way backwards to the production. And for the production, of course, we need extension services, especially, you know, if you want to produce sustainably. And there we have a lot of work to do on soil and water management, I guess. We need also extension and more investment in climate information for farmers. And we have to be cautious. Of course, all of these ITCs might have a lot of benefits, but these benefits might not be immediately, might not immediately contribute to soil health improvements as such. Bernard van Lauwe gave a nice talk about all of these aspects in detail during a VEX Community of Practice seminar about 3 weeks ago. I can only invite that people will look at this one. We have a lot of good opportunities there, but not all of them are immediately contributing, so we have to be a bit cautious. Rounding up some lessons learned from our side, we say start on the demand side, identify the opportunities to product and consumer profiles, create the demand, and then work backwards. Get your seed system right. Start with farmers' germplasm, start with what is already available. There are also some breeding lines available already, improved varieties also, and only then, if you have these opportunities already addressed, then you can consider further breeding later on. You'd have to manage your soil for nutrients and water, maintaining soil health so the plants will grow very well. And be aware that, as I said, the benefits will not be immediately available, and the ITCs are not the panacea for all food and climate problems. Remember that all of this, the reintroduction of ITC crops, must be accompanied by policies and practices. We saw that. I gave some examples, but it has to be within the promotion and aligned with the broader sustainable development agenda. Only the ITCs will not change the whole situation. I think it's a good combination. It is an add-on, and we need to take opportunity of these ITCs. However, there are still a lot of things to be solved, especially from the demand side. But I think it can be solved, and especially if we have, although it seems like a very complex, the support from the government and others on regulations and policies, so we have the right enabling environment available for the promotion and advance with these opportunities, and also at the end of the day, for our health and for the health of our environment. So with this, I hope I was not too fast. Thank you for your attention, and I hope we have some time for Q&A. Thank you. Jose, back to you.
Thank you very much. I know we had to, you had to push it along a little bit. Sorry about that. Always when it happens, if you're the last speaker, you have to do this, but so my apologies. We are out of time, but we're going to see if people can stay with us for a few more minutes and take a few questions during this Q&A part of the program. So I know we have some questions that came in already, some comments as well. Please, if you have any other questions in the audience, please just put them in the Q&A part of the Zoom app. So in terms of questions that have come in, I think some have been answered already as well, but one that I thought that we could discuss a little bit more is this issue, and Axel, you also mentioned it, also Agnes and Mina talked a bit about convenient foods that, the current generation would like to have even more. I mean, this has always been an issue that people want foods to be convenient. And it's even more of an issue right now, especially with the young generation. So what are we doing to make some of these indigenous crops and stuff? How are we doing the value addition in terms of convenient foods? Anyone wants to tackle that? Making sure that there's a diversity of foods, but convenient, because nobody wants to come home after work and start preparing for a couple hours. So what are we doing? Anybody with any quick solutions, any big ideas on this, of moving this forward? I think this was one of the questions that came through about convenient foods. Anyone? Mina, do you want to say something about this?
Hi, can you see me?
No, we can't. But
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, I think for us as Botswana, we did a survey in 2011 where indeed a lot of the people that were part of the survey talked about the very same issue that you are raising about how they love to see some of our indigenous products, you know, especially the meat ones, because, you know, they take a long time to cook. So we'll find that we started embarking on a value addition work whereby we started, you know, showcasing some canning techniques, you know, to can the pounded meat. We normally call it seswa in Botswana, which is normally just meat overcooked and then it's pounded. And we also started, you know, canning beef offals, your tripe, your intestines, because these are things that people would like to eat. But imagine coming out of your office at 5 and having to sit for like 2 to 3 hours, having to cook something like that. Now it's very interesting now that some of these products, we see them coming up in the market canned, but then the challenge that we see is that some of the producers of these products now don't have their own facilities. They have to rent the facilities from some of the bigger companies. I guess in the long term, there could be better arrangements, you know, better management of such contracts, so that we don't see, you know, a sporadic entrance of the products later on. It's like they disappear a bit. After some time, you see them coming back in the market. So I guess it's an issue of really not having their own production space, but we see them coming up in the market. Even the one that I shared about the Citrullus lanatus, to actually come up with that puree, it takes a lot of time because you have a giant melon almost between 30 and 45 centimeter long in front of you, having to cut it, boil it, and then you know, blend it traditionally. So now we have people that are actually putting such kind of products in the market. So it is a long way to go, but we see more and more of these coming up in the market, especially that, you know, Botswana are slowly coming to understand that we need to go back to the crossroads, because now we see with the rise of NCDs, we you know, that they're getting that education that indeed we need to move away from the, you know, refined foods such as your rice or pasta, and go back to our, you know, indigenous foods such as your sorghum, such as your pearl millet. And Dr. Agnes said it very well to say, as researchers, you know, helping our communities to move to these resilient crops, we need to keep an eye in making sure that as these are put in the commerce, they're actually processed in ways that we don't dilute the nutritional benefits of such products. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I'll move on to another question, if you don't mind. This one was about the fact that we now have a lot of biofortified foods in you know, that are being developed or bred. So for example, now we have iron biofortified pearl millet. We have, and these are available now in India and West Africa. And this has made iron levels 30% higher than in conventional varieties. How are we making use of these improved varieties? Anyone from the audience, from the speakers? Anyone able to speak to this?
Let me contribute. I think one of the issues is that most of these ITCs do not have established seed systems. So even though the technology is available, but most countries, they don't have seed systems or crop improvement programs that are targeting these ITCs. As such, the availability of the technology, like for example, in Malawi, is really very minimal. I'm not aware if it's already released and available for farmers to plant. Yeah.
Okay. Anyone else? Thank you very much, Agnes. I think that is a problem, yeah, that many of these are actually in trials and not necessarily fully commercialized. Axel, you wanted to chime in?
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned the whole part of seed systems. I mean, there are in some crops, some improved varieties already available, and people are working in it. You know, if you want, sweet potato is a great example for that. And of course, the whole distribution of, in this case, not seed, but planting material is a challenge for itself. But there is a huge, let's say, gap on the organization of this, of the exchange of that in different countries. It takes time, it takes effort, and it needs the backup of the government, especially on the regulations for import and something like that, especially with its cuttings and so forth. It's not easy, but I think if we really want to develop these ITCs, there is no way around it, that we have to first also to conserve the variation we have in farmers' fields, because I think that is another aspect. We could lose easily in more of these ITCs over the years when we do not really start to, you know, to collect, to preserve, and to see how we can manage them. At the same time, you know, we have to characterize them, because without knowing what it's really in there, we cannot really use it. So this characterization part is also part where I think, you know, the government has to come in, because the private sector is interested in seeing afterwards, you know, what are the traits and what are all of these things available, but they will not invest in the characterization, the basic characterization of these ITCs. So there is still a huge gap to know what we are working with. Most of them are like, you know, already, you know, still some semi-Sylvester, you know, some really traits coming from nature, not improved over the years as in other crops. So there's a long way to go, but I think when we know what we have, we can manage it better. And there we have to do an investment.
Thank you so much. So I'm going to combine a couple of questions here. So there was one about sharing knowledge across the region, and that I think is very important. But also talking about what comes first. I think, Axel, you may have mentioned it, or not sure if it's you or Innocencia, about do we start with production and making sure that we have, you know, the seeds and everything ready to go, or do we make sure that our consumers are ready to eat the products that are going to be coming from those seeds and those indigenous crops? So I remember a project that I was involved in many years ago where we did a lot of work on consumption and making sure that consumers were aware of these types of products, that they were, you know, interested in buying them, etc. But then on the production side, they weren't ready. And so which side should we tackle first? Because we've looked at the whole chain practically today. So where should we start? And that's open to all of you here. Innocencia, I see you smiling, so I think you have an answer for us.
It's a tricky question, actually, especially understanding where you should start. You can produce it, and then you have no one to consume it. And then you can, if you have a demand-driven approach where people want it, then it can actually encourage the farmers to produce it so they can bring it to the market. So it's for me, it's more of creating a lot of awareness and recognition of the crop as well, so that you reduce that gap that exists between those that produce it and those that actually consume it, so that you can actually have that link in terms of you create awareness, so you can actually create demand for that particular crop, so that farmers can actually be encouraged to produce it, so they know in a way that if they bring their crop to the market, they can fetch a price for it, a very good price, and then there is a market for that crop, and then the consumers can actually consume it. So it's I would think along the value chain, it's looking at both sides, not just creating demand and then having no one to produce it, or producing it and then having no one to consume it. So it requires a lot of effort to reduce that gap in the value chain and to actually make sure that we have a demand for what is actually being produced.
Okay, thanks. Ma'am Samba, I think you wanted to chip in. I saw that you came on a minute ago.
Yeah. What I think is that, as we say, indigenous and traditional crops, mean that in local conditions, the people know these kind of crops and use them. And as I said in my presentation, how to build this kind of program is to bring these stakeholders, the communities, very early in our consortium, if we can call it like this, to do research and to see what do we have to do to rethink or to really learn what was in our behavior before. But because I think that colonization and things like this made us lose a lot of things in our cultures. But there are some information here. We have to work with these communities to see what are the remainings and how to improve these kind of crops and then produce them. But if we come and bring information coming from Nigeria or coming from South Africa to produce them here in Senegal, it will be some problems for communities, for populations to use these kind of foods. That's what I wanted to say.
Okay, thank you. I see a hand from Mina. Is that an old hand or?
No, it's a new hand. I think the best approach, like I said, is to work with the communities, because you find that some of these crops grow in specific areas. They don't grow all over the country. So we need to use the communities where these crops grow, you know, to be ambassadors, because you can work with them and actually use their traditional ways of using those crops and actually now commercializing them. And then they can be the ambassadors of saying, this is how this product is consumed. If you look at the case of the Mopane, the Mopane worm or the Mopane caterpillar, when we were growing up, we never knew that it was edible. But over the years, when we see people coming from those districts where the Mopane worm is coming with it to town, we started saying, what is this? And we started trying it out and eating it. And now when you go into hotels all over the country, it is a delicacy, and it is one of the things that we can showcase as part of our cultural heritage as Botswana. So start with the communities where they are. Let them be the ones that you use to promote it, but then packaged in a way that the new generation can actually appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we're getting a lot of comments coming in now about different types of foods that we haven't looked at today: mushrooms, macroalgae, and so on. I think these are all great examples of how we can really expand on that diversity of foods that we talked about earlier. So one of the questions that somebody else asked is about where do we go from here? As this panel, can you come up with, I'm going to pick on people who haven't spoken yet, to come up with one or two points about where we go from here from your perspective. So I'm going to start with Lisa, because she hasn't had a chance to say anything yet from the Q&A. So, and then I'll go around to a few more of you. So just some quick, shots about where we going from here after this discussion.
Right. Well, I think that this discussion and others that I've had with lots of different stakeholders and also people with different expertise and different perspectives, I think that's the place where we start. We have to build a team of people that have interdisciplinary views and try to come together to understand, okay, well, I know that these particular crops may be the best if we're talking about trying to build soil nitrogen stocks. But maybe out of those crops that I might suggest, someone who's an economist or working on the value chains will say, well, we don't have a market for these, so let's not focus on these, let's focus on these that we have a market for. And then someone who's a nutritionist will come in and say, well, this particular one has high iron content, and so let's choose this one. So I think that where we have to start is where we are right now, is trying to build teams and networks of people that come at this problem from all different angles and come together to try to build the best cropping systems that we can, that will support farmers and be resilient and sustainable, both environmentally and economically and nutritionally sustainable. So that's where I would say we are.
Okay, great. So I'm just gonna get to others. Mam Samba, any key points that you would like us to think about for next steps?
Yeah, thank you. I think that what we have to do, have a lot of specialists working, each one in his discipline, his domain. We have to build a kind of alliance for promoting this kind of species, not only crops, but all species, neglected and underutilized species like this. And I'm thinking about some center of excellence for Arua or the World Bank or things like this, to put together all the specialists in all the domains to emphasize all the works that we have to do in these aspects. And the last thing is the fundraising. We have to build worldwide or world-class infrastructure for research, for processing, for production. For this, we have to have the funds to do the fundraising and to do cutting-edge research to produce innovations that can be transferred to the population, to the communities for promoting the food system. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. And let's go to Axel for any key points.
Any last words? I think you know, what Lisa said about coming together to build the alliance, or as Richard always says, you know, the coalition of the willing. I think we have to reach out also to the private sector, because in a lot of these elements and aspects, you know, they are the professionals. They know how to do these things, and there are several good examples around the world how the private-public partnership can really advance the development of these ITCs into markets, into market products, responding to demands. And so I think we have to include them from the very beginning, not only about the technical knowledge, but also about, you know, being able to fund also some of the developments and the research and you know, moving forward. So my last word would be, you know, look out for the private sector, not only the bigger ones, but also the middle class private sector firms in the countries. Key element for all of this.
Okay, so guys, I wanted to say that we have really run out of time, and I would have liked to go around all of the panelists, but time is not on our side, and we still do need to get some closing remarks from Tony in terms of the next steps from the AAP. So I would like to thank all of our panelists for contributing today, and all of our participants in the audience for sticking around with us. Those of you who are still here, we are recording this, so this should be available to everyone who attended and all of those who are in our network. So thank you once again, and I'd just like to give a hand of appreciation for all of you for being part of this. Thank you so much. This was an exciting couple of hours and took me back to quite a number of things in my past life. So I'd like to call on Tony to give us some closing remarks of where, you know, what are the next steps that the AAP in particular is going to do, and whatever else you might have to surprise us. Thank you.
All right, good evening, good afternoon, colleagues. Just to join Jose in congratulating our panelists for such a dynamic panel or dynamic session that we've had. You've been really able advocates of these indigenous and tropical, indigenous and traditional foods. So, you know, beginning with the nutrition aspects of it, on how do we develop these value chains and how do we make sure that the smallholder farmers, the farmers themselves actually benefit from these. So how do we actually engage with these farmers? So we heard that from Dr. Maina Mosele. On the policy side, we heard that we got insights from Axel on that, and then on the knowledge generation part of it. So how do we actually begin to do research in these kinds of things? So Prof. Mam Sambambai gave us a template, if you will, of how, he gave us the challenge. What are the problems that we do need to be looking at, but also the template on how we develop a research program into these crops. Also to thank our audience for your patience being here for this close to 2 hours now. So in terms of the next steps as a consortium, as AAP, we're looking to first, we're in the process of bringing together a coalition, as several people mentioned on this. So people from diverse disciplines, from nutrition, soil science, policy and innovation and entrepreneurship, to develop a program that would actually promote these the kinds of issues that we've been talking about. How about we can exploit or harness the potential of these crops to for nutrition, for soil health, and for improving farmers' livelihoods. So you'll be hearing from us. We are in the process of putting together that coalition, but also putting together that program that would ideally be implemented in several SADC countries. We're starting with the Southern African region. So we're thinking about 6 or 7 countries in the Southern African region. But also we want to continue these conversations. So hopefully we'll get emails from this conversation, and we'll also be giving out updates on where we are in terms of developing that project. With these few remarks, I would like to thank you all for being here and for your participation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and goodbye to all of you. Have the great rest of your day, and we will be in touch. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.